How we doing, guys? So
That
tonight,
was the smartest move you've done in years.
I did a
I
quick
would have
too.
argued another 20 minutes with Donnie about that.
Yeah, and I would have continued.
Yep. Great job, Logan.
And that's the beautiful part about this show is we're not afraid to pull back the curtain and show you the behind the scenes stuff and do the deeper dives. And what they're referring to is a basketball conversation that got out of control right before we were starting the show. And it just so happens it is the show that I told Evan, hey, we're not going to bring basketball up that much. This is going to be your show. You're going to platform this show. And then they almost derailed it for another 20 minutes. So I had to go Wizard of Oz style and pull back the curtain and start the show and just let it roll. But in all seriousness, we did want to give Evan a shout out because we brought him on and introduced him really rapid fire style into DFS. We're like, hey, do you like our vibe? Do you like what we're doing? Like we love teaching this game and we love presenting lineups in a unique way to kind of that beginning crowd. What better way to do that than have a actual guinea pig and Evan be on screen and learn as the season progresses? But it actually so happens that Evan's very knowledgeable and very diverse in Dynasty, which I thought had a lot of DFS crossover. But first, I wanted you to describe what got you into Dynasty and then just kind of take this platform and make it your own, Evan. Kind of give us a glimpse into your world and let us kind of experience it through your eyes. So go
Yes,
ahead, buddy.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Logan. So, yeah, no, I just got started with Dynasty in the 2017 season. That was my first ever year doing it. It was offered to me through somebody else I knew in another redraft league that had an opening in a 10-team league. We didn't have the sleeper platform that a lot of people, if you're familiar with playing for the most part Dynasty, we didn't even have that back then quite yet. We were stuck playing on an ESPN of all platforms, which if you've ever even played in any ESPN league, it is not built for Dynasty whatsoever. And the same with Yahoo, too. ESPN is accepted by a lot of people just for your plain vanilla, plain Jane redraft leagues. But yeah, trying to play Dynasty in it, you're stuck having to put together spreadsheets, enter people's rosters manually, uh, find another external way of getting league-wide votes. So watching this guy run this league kind of helped teach me how to run a dynasty league in a way, what to do, what I didn't like the way he did, and so on and so forth. So I kind of put together this piece of primer content called How to Be a Better Dynasty League Commissioner in Sleeper, which is an unpublished article of mine that I didn't publish anywhere yet, as I was kind of dabbling. Do I want to be a dynasty writer? Do I want to try and run my own platform? So what better time than the off season here to just pull it up and share it right here for if anybody listening is in such a league and maybe is considering running their own or just wants better ideas of how to keep it going. Because at least from my experiences, I've been running this dynasty league that you're looking here on the screen since 2020. So we just completed our 4th season. And the one thing I'll tell you, running your own dynasty league is hard. Let's be honest, it's not easy getting people to want to join a dynasty league. Because the idea of having a fantasy football league that runs year round does scare a lot of people, especially when you find this out when you're asking people, hey, do you want to join this league?
I
So,
understand that perfectly with my D&D group. It
exactly.
is so hard to even get 4 people to coordinate doing stuff all year.
Exactly. And I mean, not having D&D experience myself, I can imagine there's a lot of commitment to that, being it's going to be, I don't know any D&D leagues that do it over Zoom, but still.
We did. I was in one during the pandemic. Yeah, a couple of my friends. That's how we kept it going. That's how we started one. Was, hey, what else do we got to do? Let's get on these Zoom calls once a week.
But Evan, I want to mention that's also what makes a good commissioner, even though it's totally time consuming and totally like off kilter a bit. But that's the level that I respect most out of Dynasty people is that they're willing to do all these adaptive technology challenges and overcoming things. Like I used to run Madden leagues in a very similar kind of way where you had to construct 32 users to run 32 teams. Obviously, each team's not equally created. You have some people that are going to come in mid-season the roster's not the same. There might have been a bad trade here, an injury there, and so that you face a lot of that the same way. You're not only having a season long commitment, but you're having a year to year, off season transition, stuff like that. It all matters.
Exactly. And if you're unfamiliar with Dynasty, the roster that you get is what you get year round. There's no do-over. There's no brand new draft unless you're until the rookie drafts happen. So this is a roster that you're stuck with. And if your team sucks, it's hard to keep the patience going in a league like that, where if your team's not very good, because you got to have guys who are super into it to try and build, no pun intended, a dynasty in itself. Whether you want to hoard up draft picks, tank, that's up to you. But so all of that said, you might have tried asking people who have never tried a dynasty league before, who don't know the fun that they're missing. So to ensure that folks of all the levels, all experience levels, don't think negatively about your league, the positive experiences naturally require a good commissioner who are in touch with what members of their league want. And no matter what type of dynasty league you're running, I put together 9 pointers of making the commissioner role easier to make your league more fun. Number 1 is having your league constitution ready for the inaugural season before enforcing anything, because it's just good to have the paperwork to back up decision making, introduce the rules to the people in the league, who want to join the league, what to expect here. So this is just my sample constitution of what I put together that I try and update on a yearly basis. This is out of date. This is from last season already. I haven't touched it yet, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's at least good to have something to show people. So describe the format real briefly. 10-team PPR Dynasty League. Teams broken up into 2 divisions on 5 teams each for scheduling purposes only. How are the playoffs set up? And then you start getting into the rules, which, I don't know if I put together the rules in the neatest way possible, but describe the entry fee. When do you want the entry fee to be turned in? What do you do in case of a tie? I probably skipped over the majority rule thing. So off-season votes, like how does it happen if the league wants to vote on new rules to enforce into the future seasons? What prize money do you give out?
Payout structure, yeah.
Yep, payout structure. Please pay attention to your teams. Don't be the type of person that abandons the league. Please stay committed to this. Now, granted that remaining committed to the league doesn't mean, have the sleeper app on you at all times and be sure to be ready to receive like 2 trades a week in January of all months, right? Like there is some downtime to give people a break, because most people don't want to think about fantasy football till it's draft time, right?
Right.
So, courtesy, if you don't want to play anymore, please tell me. You don't have to find a replacement for me. I'll happily, do that with whoever's got somebody on the waiting list. What do I do if you haven't set up a lineup in time? Excluding a kicker or defense on bye, like if you want to be that person who doesn't want to play a kicker or defense on a certain week, that's up to you. No lopsided trades, no cheating. If you have a co-owner for your team, tell me first so I know there's 2 people managing the team. Please be respectful. What to do in case it gets toxic, because it's important. I've unfortunately had this experience in another league where trash talking got a bit out of control and personal, and it led to me actually leaving that league and starting this league. So little bit of history on my part.
And that's going to happen in a dynasty league where history is important. Like that's part of the fun and the enjoyment of the positive of that kind of league and that kind of structure is having that long-term, owner after year owner. You don't want to have that kind of turnover. So having that positive environment is more crucial than like a year-to-year league.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why it's at least a personal philosophy of mine to try not to burn any bridges, because if you do that by obviously trying to be shitty about like trade offers and whatnot, you're probably going to have a harder time making deals in the future, as just one example. And this isn't even so much of a rule, but just, if you have any suggestions to improve the league, it's always welcome. go ahead and tell me. We put it to a vote in the offseason. Describe how the rosters are constructed. So I run a relatively vanilla dynasty league. I don't do anything fancy, tight end premium, super flex, yada yada. 2 flex spots, kicker and defense, along with a standard quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. You're allowed to play without a kicker or defense on any given week at your own risk. 20 bench slots. And then I trust people not to stash something like 5 kickers. I don't have positional limits. Injured reserve slots, you have up to 4 with the outdoor IR status. I actually didn't put in here COVID status, too, back when that was a thing back in 2020, because I was allowing that in my league as well, which I don't think has been a thing for years now. Describe that sleeper automatically will lock your roster for the next week if you don't remove a player who loses that designation. And the commissioner, me, will help you make suggestions on how to proceed with the roster, but won't be making any changes for you. And taxi squad slots. Taxi squad is when you can place anybody with a certain amount of young experience in these slots for it to carry over to your roster. Doesn't count toward your bench, where if they're a rookie or a sophomore, depending on your league settings like mine.
So like red shirt?
It is kind of like a red shirt, yes. So quarterbacks in the NFL typically need about like 2 seasons to start really showing their stuff. And I'm thinking Bryce Young is going to be one of them. So Bryce Young would be a good example in my league here, where if he's not ready for a bench slot because he's still getting better, you can stick him in a taxi slot and hope that someday he's a much better starter for the Panthers, where you can then stick him on your bench after he's completed 2 seasons.
Have you seen some good strategy with this kind of mindset? Like, have you seen someone really utilize this strategy well and then maybe not utilize it that well? Like, have you seen that kind of compare and contrast?
Yeah, ultimately, I wouldn't say there's a good or bad way to do it, because it depends on how you want your taxi squad set up, where some commissioners are sticklers where they say, once you set up your taxi squad, you can't make any changes to it until the season's over, which I don't personally like at all. I like it to have it like a come and go as you please type of thing, where, if you want to stick somebody young in there to try and manipulate your roster in case there's injuries and you got to pick somebody else up on the waiver wire, so be it. Excuse me. And then when there's a player in his 3rd season, then he's no longer eligible, and Sleeper does a damn good job enforcing that.
So you use it more like a practice squad, where it's like, hey, you can basically use this kind of like a fantasy injured reserve, and like if you feel like the guy's ready and you want to see what he's got, you can take that red shirt off. That's interesting.
But they have to be a young player. Okay.
Yes.
But no one can steal off your taxi squad, right?
That's correct. It's not a true practice.
That's where I was saying like red shirt. Like you can't really take a red shirt. Like if you red shirt a freshman in college, like unless he leaves in the now, which is what they would do now, but like that's just a year of eligibility they get to keep. Mm-hmm. So it's basically just a year you get to keep that player. You could still trade him. I like your idea. Like if you need to, you could still bring him up.
Exactly.
And play him. You just have to drop another guy because you need the slot. Like I like that idea actually. Okay.
Yeah. So these are just 4, in my case, 4 extra slots for 30-man rosters, because these are already ginormous teams in the first place for a 10-team PPR league. So I know that a couple of people, at least in my league, have wondered, like, how do I fill up the rest of my roster? Because this is probably the biggest team they've ever had. And that's just the way it is with Dynasty, where you're going to be stashing a lot of talent that may just be like 2nd-string running backs, or maybe even a 3rd-string receiver that might step up someday, like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, for example. So you get creative with this stuff, and that's why I love the taxi squad in the end anyway, just because you at least get to put some rookies on there. Like for me, I'll give you an example. Kyron Williams was a perfect taxi squad guy for me, because look at him now. He's a stud starting for the LA Rams, where nobody was quite sure if he was going to amount to anything behind Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers. So, bam! Now I've got Kyron Williams to at least last me a few seasons, hoping that he stays healthy. So keeping this moving forwards, and then this is just more or less a copy and paste of the scoring that we have here.
Yep.
And I don't do anything too crazy. I still do 4-point passing touchdowns just because that's my personal philosophy, which I'm sure there'd be some people that would split hairs with me about it, and then I love 40+ yard bonuses.
I play in
So,
a league I play in a 10-man league that it's not a dynasty, but we have that same rule where like 40-yard completions, 40-yard rushes, 40-yard catches all give you a plus a point.
yep.
Well,
And I love those.
Yeah, we'll see that in DraftKings compared to FanDuel. We kind of joked about it, but we did build that FanDuel lineup for the Super Bowl, and I do plan on using FanDuel a little bit more here and there for the football season, whether that be the spring football or NFL. But DraftKings, for example, is very heavy on the bonuses. They really incentivize the bonuses. FanDuel not so much. But I like your approach, Evan, of having everything laid out so structured, because you're not saying, hey, everyone in my league has to like this rule, or everyone in my league has to, think that I'm the best commissioner or that I got it right. But you're giving people the skeleton key. You're giving them all the information, and you're saying, hey, you don't have to like it, but these are what we use. So, take it for what you will.
Yep.
I think that's a good approach.
And just like I put in the rules, I mean, I'm always open to any suggestions that I'm willing to put to a vote,
Right.
as long as it's reasonable.
Ooh, you knock people for missed field goals. Ooh, I like that.
Yes.
Not enough. I don't think enough leagues all around do that.
Yeah,
and
that's
if you're
the thing.
going to give me 5 points for a 50-yarder, you need to be knocking me for missed field goals and missed point afters.
Absolutely. And for the negative points like this, I try not to be too harsh on it, such as like, intercepted passes -1, missed field goals -1. I try not to go too crazy with stuff like that. Or same thing with bonus points too. Like all bonus points for me, just 1 extra point is all you need. Don't go too crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then there's special teams players will at least get some credit if you happen to have like a really good wide receiver or running back who's a good kick returner. That's a little harder to strategize in the first place. Team defense, I like to add on the hit on quarterback, for example, 0.5 point. So that way there are less DST units that don't result in negative points if they're a shitty defense and give up a lot of points, for example. Hit on quarterback is just a little extra spice that will not make your defense any less valuable. Just puts a little more value on it.
It really, really makes it like I would want to focus on any defense that just gets any kind of pressure. I don't care if they get sacks now.
In the past, like that was what the Patriots always did. They never cared about
Brady needs to. I don't care if we get credited with a sack. Brady hits the ground. Like teams that are going to play like that, I got to have the defense for that.
The Patriots never emphasized sacks. They just wanted you to get pressure and hit the quarterback. We never had a good outside of Chandler Jones.
That's a nifty little thing. Like, and sacks are okay. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yep. Otherwise, these are just the default point values that I keep saying. I don't like to do anything too fancy, but I just have these little knick-knack ideas here and that will at least make defense not so painful to play.
Yeah.
Same thing with special teams defense. That's always extra nice when you have a DST that gets a touchdown. In general, fumbles are -1, fumbles lost are -2. And then we start getting into the rookie draft. And that's when you can start trading draft picks. That you get everybody gets 4 draft picks by default because my rookie draft is always up to 4 players unless you trade for other people's draft picks to get more. 4 rounds for each player with 90 seconds per pick. My rookie drafts typically take no more than about an hour. It's really quick. And then naturally it's linear because these are draft picks. It's not going to snake every round.
Okay, I see what you do. You have a consolation bracket. You basically have like a consolation tournament at the end of the year for all the shitty teams during the playoffs, and that will determine your top 4 order.
Exactly.
So instead of just like every other league where it's like, who's the worst of the worst who can do the worst, you get the first pick. No, who's the best of all of the shit of you? You get the first pick.
Exactly. And that's my anti-tanking measure to ensure that you're not just not setting your lineups and just losing on purpose. That way you got to work for it.
Everyone has something to play for in the playoffs.
Exactly. Right. So that way, at least it makes the money worthwhile. I only charge $30 for people to get in the league. That way it's not some like crazy monetary commitment every year to build a team. And then, so winner of the constellation ladder gets the number 1 overall pick, and then it just keeps going from here. Right now, my league is voting on swapping these two, which I think I would agree with, at least allowing 5th place to take the 5th pick, just because you have to win to earn it. And then it just goes backwards from here in the winners bracket, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it just keeps going from there. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities with real life too. You got to, if you really want to rebuild with youth, you got to trade to get those draft picks and hope that you can give up something good to get back those picks.
Well, even as fantasy, like I mentioned, me and Donnie met because we used to run Madden leagues together, and like a lot of the dynasty principles you built in your rules and your structures and kind of your framework is exactly what we would do in the fantasy realm. It's just in the fantasy realm you have control, or you play out the outcomes, or we're not actually watching the real game, but like from a roster construction and a like rules format, it's a lot of the same stuff because you're worried about the present, you're worried about almost the current, like you're worried about the distant present, but then the current moment, like you want to incentivize everyone. And the thing is, you got to incentivize the people that care at the lowest level and the highest level. But then people forget about that middle range. That middle range is probably the most depressed people I found when I ran my Madden leagues, because they were good enough to almost make the playoffs every week, or they'd be like, right up there with the playoff teams. Then they score and they would lose close games. Anyone that knows, if you're on the teetering of like almost doing anything, almost winning a milli, almost cashing, you're on the borderline to making money that week, and you just missed the profit line by like less than a half a point in DFS. That's the kind of stuff. So I feel like the middle ground gets lost. But then, Evan, I'd be curious. You mentioned a rule change in your league and how it's being voted on. I found it very difficult because, like you, I'd make all these rules and I would try to make it as fair as possible, and I would try to have a good structure. But then I'd have a suggestion box. But then I'd be like, some of your suggestions are going to suck. And I would tell people that up front. Like, if you just come at me with a silly suggestion, I'm going to treat it like with a silly response. But if it has some nuance, I'll consider it. But then what happens is, because you already have all this control and this leadership, when you put things to a vote, people are like, well, whatever you say or however you sway this vote, you have so much influence that you're going to sway the league. So like, how do you have fun as a member or as like an owner yourself while also still being this commissioner figure? Because I did it well. I mean, I did it for over 10 years, but it was a hard balance for me to go from, hey, you got to play Logan, this guy, this Lions owner. Oh yeah, but Logan's also the commissioner. So there was always that push and pull.
Yeah, and that's what I like best about Sleeper too, is that the commissioner controls make it really difficult to be a corrupt cheater as the commissioner yourself. And it's kind of funny. Like, I mean, my brother teases me all the time about this. I've yet to win any league in which I'm commissioner. I'm always the one winning other people's leagues, just not yet my own. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. That's just luck.
I think you would agree with that though, Gov, right? In the DFS sense, it's so much easier to be like not even close to the cash line, or you're in the top 10. But if you're in that middle range where you're just barely cashing or you're just barely missing out, that's
those are the worst. Like, it's great to sweat near a win, but like sweating a min cash is insane. That's annoying as hell. That is a purgatory to be in.
So I'd imagine, Evan, the hardest thing for you is like to fill like that 1 or 2 spots. Like you have a really good core, but it's that couple spots that always linger that make it most difficult for you.
Yeah. I mean, it just I guess it just ultimately depends on how much people are willing to work to try and build their team.
Yeah.
And if they just understand the fun that there is in having a team that's I guess arguably the closest thing to a real life NFL GM, which I try to sell it like that with my league. And at the same time, I'll get into this later, but having a waiting list is fucking critical if you run a dynasty league, because nothing is worse than you're scrambling to try and find somebody new to play in a league, especially if you lose somebody, heaven forbid, mid-season. So I'll get into that a little later, though.
You could say the same about a Madden league in that sense as well.
Yeah.
That was always something we had to be prepared for.
And I'm curious when you get there, because I do have a question about your waiting list. Because, like Donnie kind of alluded to it, the Madden waiting list was very interesting because you needed one, but it was hard to kind of keep people engaged. So I'm curious to see how you did that.
Yeah. For sure. I'll keep going here. We're almost done with this document anyway. So I just described the waivers and free agency, how that works. I am one league where I won't do daily waivers yet, which I know is a growing piece of popularity within a lot of fantasy football leagues in general, because people are getting busier. They may not always have their phone with them while they're on the toilet to check their leagues, and they may want to make it a little more fair so that when a big piece of critical news comes out in like October, there's always somebody with more time on their hands to grab that key backup running back before somebody else sees the news like hours later. So that's why daily waivers is starting to become more popular. But my league, I haven't adopted that yet. But if that's the case, then so be it. Everything else is pretty vanilla here. Everybody gets $100 worth of fab to bid on anybody with the W designation that you really want on your roster. You can do $0 bids as well. And you get a waiver priority order as a tiebreaker for if somebody does a tie bid, whether it's $0 or whatever they enter. And tie will go, and that will break the tie between the managers who do that. Beginning of every season, the order is the reverse order of the rookie draft. So you start the season with the number one slot for waiver priority order if you win the league. And it doesn't reset. Lastly, trading. So trade deadline begins at week 13, begins at 12 o'clock a.m. Central on a Tuesday. Trading resumes after the championship match. And then by then, you're free to make offseason trades whenever you want. So, like my league right now, you cannot do offseason acquisitions until after the rookie draft, but all trades are open. So you can even trade in freaking January if you wanted to go bold. Completed trades, we don't have any that are being held on like a waiting period for like 1 day or 2 days. They go through immediately, but I'm still checking them out anyway to make sure that there's no collusion or just some horrible trade that's going to blatantly throw off the league. Because lopsided trades are going to happen, and that's kind of the hard part about being a commissioner too, which we kind of touched on, Logan, where it's like, how do you avoid that bias where it's like, well, I don't like that trade, I'm undoing it. You got to have some standard that you set here to be like, all right, well, maybe this trade that just went through is not necessarily fair, but I'm the commissioner and these two actually agreed to it, so I got to let it slide. They both agreed to it.
Well, see, just to allude to something we can correlate it to, our Madden leagues, we had a whole committee for people to do trades. And what was it, Logan? Like 5 people? And Logan hated trades. I'm going to be honest. He never wanted to approve, especially if it's a star player. But we usually got him through. And you got to realize, like, the bad players sometimes don't have to give as much as like a top player. But I don't know if you even consider that in the dynasty.
We don't have anything like a committee per se. It's just me, just because we're a small 10-team league. But I guess in a way, my backup commissioner is my brother, just in case something happens to me and I'm incapacitated and somebody's got to run the league. So then he at least has the commissioner controls to keep it going in case the worst happens. But that's a little morbid, but it at least says how much I think far in advance, because I want to make sure the league can run.
Huh? Yeah, it definitely speaks to your dedication, though. Like, we don't want any of the bad stuff to happen. And Donnie was right. Like, I was willing to be the bad cop in my league a bit, because I'm like, someone has to be the bearer of bad news. Like, someone has to play the devil's advocate. So, like, Donnie is right. I preferred trades far less than most of my committee members, but I was okay with them. But I wanted to set a hard standard that if you were going to trade, it was going to be worth something for both people. And I don't know, because you charge money for this. So like, even a dynasty, like even if we transitioned and we ran a dynasty league and not a Madden league, the fact that we did it for free and you're doing it for money probably does change your perspective on a trade. Like, yeah, you want to make sure things are fair and balanced, but yet when people are dealing with their actual financial balance, you're like, well, maybe this guy wants to, put somebody on his taxi squad. Maybe he wants like that young up and coming team, that trust the process kind of Philadelphia style, roster rebuild. That's part of the fun is like all these melting pots of fantasy believers and thinkers coming together. Like even the four of us, I guarantee you we would construct different teams in your league. You know,
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, um, this last section actually kind of leads into another article, which I'll get into a little later. But anyway, that's just the sample constitution that I have for this particular league. It's good to show this stuff in case you got to introduce somebody new. Point number 2, invite the best people you know you'd want to have in a fantasy football league long term, which that's going to be a lot harder said than done. And there's nothing worse than being in a dynasty league with one or more people who either aren't easy to get along with, complain frequently about trades that happen, refuses to be reasonable in any trade offer. Like, if you offer a fair trade, they reply with a kicker, and it's like, oh, fuck you. Isn't communicated enough with the league, and it's not the easiest task to find those people. But life is also too short to play the game with people who aren't this helpful to make the experiences more fun. It's always better to have a commissioner take over a team that rather than put up with negativity from one person that brings the rest of the league down. Point number 3, be patient and available for league mates who are new to Sleeper. Now, Sleeper is, if you've played on the platform, it is far different from Yahoo and ESPN. There is a learning curve to it. You're looking at the desktop browser version of this, and the mobile app is also a different experience. We have to swipe left and swipe right.
Evan, if I could just stop you just for a second, if you could zoom in, that'd be great because the interface is a bit too far away for us to see the details. So, like, if you're trying to show off the slight differences, it might be easier.
Back, guys.
I mean, there's not really a lot to look at the moment, but yeah, I mean, that's just the general league overview. I haven't set the draft time yet because we're gonna vote on the rookie draft, but and then this just shows everybody else in the league, which you can also see it here too, where everybody's got their draft positions set just based on how well they did this season. I took 3rd in my own league, so I've got draft position number 8. I've got the Monday Night Meltdown. Available players are right here, so if you want to draft Greg Ward in the future rookie draft, you can even do that if you're that insane. The trending tab, which has been funny to look at all year long.
Well, yeah, trending. Actually, Logan Thomas got released today. If you didn't see that.
Yep, and that's why he's the top drop.
Yeah. We're on football. Commanders and the Patriots both hit over 100 million available in cap space today with their releases.
As was the plan all along. And then the dedicated section to look at ingoing and outgoing trades, real life football scores, and it's pretty easy within the desktop browser version, and it's a little different in the mobile app, which I don't have a way to show it here on screen, but maybe that'll be for another time.
Do you have a crash course that you go through? Do you ever send somebody a thing on a Discord so you can stream your screen and show them?
I haven't needed to do that yet with anybody in my league, but I'm always happy to send them screenshots via text message or just, I've got a phone with a stylus, so it's easy for me to circle stuff on the screenshot in case they have trouble working the app. I'm more than happy to help everybody because, that's the point of being a good commissioner, right? You want to make sure everybody knows how to play. So, haven't gotten that far yet, Donnie, but that's at least a good idea. Point number 4, don't make any major changes to your league without a vote from all managers. Because people don't want to get a sudden message that states that your league all of a sudden adds a second kicker slot when people didn't agree to it. Major decisions like that, always easier to implement when everybody has a say in the offseason. So, it kind of like the example I gave earlier, swapping the 5th and 6th place draft spots for the winner's side of the playoff bracket is being put up to a vote at the moment.
And Evan, I think that's very important to mention too. That it's obviously just out of a mutual respect thing of like, yeah, this is a fun game and this is like we're all doing this out of a hobby. But you're also, like I say, they're putting up money. So they're putting up money in the short term, but the long term. Like they know the game and the style. But if you make these changes without consulting them all, like you're playing with their money in a way. And that's not cool. So like that, there's a reason why you have, these rules and stuff this way. Where if it was a free league, it would be handled differently.
Yeah, if it's a free league that I'm bullshitting around with, then yeah, it's like I'm just gonna do whatever I want with that, and if people don't like it, then I'll just get some randos to join me. I don't care. But for a serious league like this, yeah, I'm absolutely gonna be rather not too meticulous, but I'll at least be a lot more careful about what we do differently in the future. And so if you do lose people who either don't like the changes or just want to drop out of the league for whatever reason, point number 5. Have a waiting list in case someone wants to bounce from this league, which I said I'd get back to. So you always want to be prepared to find a replacement in that event that somebody drops. I wouldn't say there's one right way to do it. For me, it's been a lot of like spur of the moment occasions where I've got like I won't do any name drops here on the show, but I've at least got somebody who's fairly known with the DFS community that at least wants a look at what a dynasty league is like, and then I have another person. I have 2 people on my waiting list right now in case I do lose somebody in the off season.
And
so
you can use my name too if it helps. Just give them a dummy name too, to give an example if you need.
Yeah, absolutely. So like if I have Logan on top of my list, and then it's either I'll send a text or an email if a slot opens up and go, hey, I got an opening. Here's the roster that you'd be inheriting. Would you like to join? So. And then if he agrees to do it, then I'll just expect the $30 entry fee before week 1, which is pretty fucking late. I'm pretty loose with that after Labor Day, and then hope we have some fun, right? So
have you ever had somebody drop midseason or no?
Not midseason yet, just only in the off season. So I'm pretty thankful for that after 4 seasons.
Assuming that you did though, like I'm curious because
do you have does the new person have to do a buy-in as well at that point?
New person would not have to do a buy-in. I've never had a situation where somebody wants to drop mid-season and then go, oh, I want my money back. Where, I would at that point say no because you agreed to do it.
Right.
But at that point, I would probably say that would be a case-by-case basis where if it's like, somebody's dying mother's in the hospital and they're low on money to pay for the hospital expenses, right. I might be a little more lenient on that point. You know what I mean? I'm happy to cover that.
I was going to say, have you ever had a waiting list guy like not work out? Like when a spot opened up in the off season, did you always go to the first guy and that worked out? Or have you ever had to like first guy came in, looked at the team, looked at the interface and said no?
I think that's been once so far where they just weren't ready to join the league, and I said, okay, off to number 2.
And Evan, my commissioner, like when I was running Madden leagues, I preferred it when people did that. If they came into my league and like they didn't want the Brown, because like for example, I can remember one time a guy came in and he was going to take over the Browns, but he thought like the Browns hadn't made any trades, and Donnie mentioned that we didn't allow crazy trades anyways. Like most of that team was still intact. But for some reason, he really wanted this young player that was on the roster in the traditional,
probably at that point like a Denzel Ward.
Yeah. So So it was just like, oh, this isn't going to fit. He left. But I've also had it where someone joins, they'll take the team right away. They'll be like super excited. They'll be engaged for like, the first 10 hours. You're like, okay, I found someone good. And then it's like, oh, they broke every rule, and it was almost like they disrespected your whole entire rule book. And they're on the waiting list. You're like. That's the one thing you kind of expect is, hey, they're excited to be in my league. They're going to know the rules. They're going to be excited for the chance. And sometimes those are the people that don't work out the most. It's kind of what I was going to ask you about Gov, though. So is it first come, first serve? Or do you or does it depend? Like, for example, if me and Donnie are on your waiting list and you know that I'm more flexible to join mid-season where Donnie would be it'd be better for him to take over a team at the start of the year based on our philosophies or how we construct teams.
But Donnie was the first one that you had on your list who you were going to give it to. Yeah.
Are you
selective in that way, or is it first come, first serve?
I look at it like first come, first serve. And there are, I mean, granted that as I'm talking about this, I have not seen every possible scenario where, like, for example, I haven't had anybody
Oh yeah,
drop out
4 years
midseason yet.
in, exactly. Yeah, 4
Yeah.
years in. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, it's always first come, first serve. And if they just don't want to join midseason and someone else does, then okay. Well, if you like this roster, here you go. And then you'll have the chance to stay in the league after the season's over. I have had that struggle when I first started this league in 2020, where I had quite a few people not follow through, in which they just weren't paying attention to the league, and they just for whatever reason were not checking their team to even play. So I was able to at least reach out to a few people in an old fantasy football community that were willing to be placeholders until I found full-time people, which I thought was really fucking cool. Those two people.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, I mean, kind of, and that's the thing. It's like I try to be that selective to make sure that I pick the right people. And at the same time, point number 6, be as communicative as possible with the league without being overbearing. I'm an old guy, and I use email as the primary source of league communication for like important dates, reminders, announcements, celebrations. So whatever method you choose, even if it's a group text, just make sure that it's something that everyone doesn't mind checking. So... And then number 7, have a contacts list that's publicly available for the league to ensure that everyone has ways to talk to each other. Because sending blind trades, let's be honest, doesn't work 99% of the time. You're lucky if a blind trade works out. It's a lot easier if
Everyone
people can
should
get a
have
hold of each
some
other.
sort of contact, whether it's a Discord, if you really want to give them the phone number, like whatever. There should be some way I can contact you that goes to you.
Exactly. Yes.
Some any kind of like some sort of chat. Yeah.
Yeah, we did that in my league too, Evan. We would have we kind of have a review
And
process.
that's why I love Discord. I would create my private Discord and just invite those.
Yeah,
10
see,
people.
this is
Especially
why
in
Discord's
Discord,
perfect
like
for that
you
stuff.
could have your own personal 10-man like private chat in Discord,
Yeah,
and like that would be perfect for a league like that.
and you could almost have categories off of that, like
Because then it's a public chat to all 10 people. in
Yeah,
the league
you
can
do a
see everything.
trade block and whatnot, and it's just so easy to access. I love Discord though.
Yeah, I use it for a lot. But like I said, like there's WeChat, there's plenty of other chat platforms. You just got to have something that everyone can contact everyone.
Technically, there's still MySpace.
Well, to that point though, Evan's making, like we also in my league chose the platform we talked about, Discord, that had the most flexibility and functionality for what we were trying to do. So obviously that was a leader in the clubhouse already because of how easy of use it was. You could give people certain roles and responsibilities within that platform that was important for committees and when you have voting on trades and stuff like that. But there was also times where it's like, no, you should look at this new platform because they're doing something smarter, and I'd be open to that. And we'd also have another, like an alternative contact list, and you probably do as well, where they could give, go saying their phone number or their email, but it wasn't required. It was like, if you want to give additional information for a trade, for, future talks, you can, but here's what we require and here's what we offer just as sides. So I'm sure you see that in your league where you have some commissioners that really care and then some that, they don't care as much, but they're still active. And so I think you have to reward all that activity and take it for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I try to do other things such as the next point I'm going to list here, number 8, host some league events at places like restaurants if everyone in the league lives near each other. So my dynasty league that we're looking at here, unfortunately, I've got a few people from around the country. They're not necessarily in the Chicagoland area. So as one idea, when we have our rookie draft every year, I'll open up a Google Meet session just because I hate Zoom. And then that way we can at least have some video conferencing while we're drafting so we can at least, crack wise and trash talk and whatever we want to talk about.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like,
so yeah, I mean, even if you can do a postseason party where trophies can be given to the championship and consolation bracket winners, that's another common one that a lot of fantasy football leagues do in the first place. And then the last point, number 9, just be positive, enthusiastic, because nobody likes a Debbie Downer or a micromanaging authoritarian dictator running the show. When you're the commissioner, you're the one setting the tone for how you want the league to be for years to come. It's your canvas, you're the paintbrush, your actions paint that your actions are the paint that gets applied to the canvas. So try and think about how other people are going to feel with what you do, no matter what that is. So 9 points. I like to think that's simple enough of how to be a good dynasty commissioner. A lot of this can apply to best ball and other formats too, but I'm a dynasty guy, so I say dynasty.
I'm glad you mentioned best ball because I was just going to say I truly think in your last few points there, that's where dynasty or like these, I would just say committed leagues, whether it's IDP, any kind of league that makes you do a little bit different and makes like you care about fantasy football in a unique way, kind of adds a unique kind of tattoo to fantasy football. It's fantasy football and here's an add-on. Because I feel like that's where DraftKings fails is they don't got a whole lot of social engagement, a whole lot of social interaction. It's like they have the good peer-to-peer structures. Their website runs well. They have great, contests. They have contests of different, pay structures, and you can go head-to-head. You probably don't even know this, Evan, because me and Gov have been playing long enough, and we're using my platform a lot of times when we build lineups. But DraftKings even has like an experience level to their badge tier so there is contests just for beginners that have played like less than 500 contests. Let's just say I don't remember the number.
DraftKings also has the most useless friends list I've ever seen. So
Yeah, the socials on DraftKings is a little like. Honestly, if you're not creating your own contests, that's what it's good for.
Yeah, but
in truth,
I'd like to see.
I could be friends with all of us. We could have our own name, and I could create a league where we're creating like a $5 contest every week to compete against each other.
Yeah, see, though, I'd like to see something
and
just simple where you could see where your friends place if you're in the same contest. Just even if you're not cashing, because that's the issue with it right now. You can't see them if they're not cashing.
Yeah, if you don't cash, they don't tell you what place you're in. Yeah.
Just show me where they are.
And you'll
have to download the full CSV.
And
look at it in Excel. It's fine. What? You can't do that?
I mean, that's for
it's annoying. I can do it, but
I didn't know you could do that. Gov.
Yes, you can. You download the contest CSV, so you get all the players, all the entrants, all of their lineups.
Mm-hmm.
What are you saying,
stuff.
Logan?
But no, that's kind of what I mean. Though is like we make this podcast so we can bring the fun entertainment to DraftKings because we know it's more than a calculation game. We want it to be more than a math game. So we want this kind of like fun, interactive things. I mean, that's what C was praising our podcast for, was that we weren't trying to be like anyone else. We were just coming together as a group. And I think that's a big advantage that like dynasty leagues have over like DraftKings because there's so much changeover week to week with DraftKings. Their social engagement is really poor. Like, if I ran DraftKings, I would do more league kind of contest. I would do more like, hey, I believe that's why they started doing best ball because they wanted, friend groups like we're going to do that draft together. They wanted like people to debate rankings and, to see the different ADPs and expected values and stuff like that. So like even the fact that you can't get all your league mates together and you get, them all together on a Google Hangout or Zoom, and you get that interaction, you get that beers at that pool before you draft. All that stuff adds to it, and really there is a market for that I don't think DraftKings can tap into, and I feel like that's your market.
Right. I do have one more topic that I wanted to go over, which I'm hoping won't take longer than about 15 minutes. How to trade in fantasy football.
See, this one the one I was hoping you'd get to.
Yes. So I would say it's the most exciting and stressful thing to do in fantasy football, depending on how you like to play the game. And regardless of how many trades that you complete in fantasy football, I at least want to put your minds to ease on how to make it easier for everybody. Where maybe you're thinking, well, hey, Evan, come on, I already know how to trade. Why would I need this guide? Because there's a strong likelihood that you start all your trades by clicking on your fantasy platform's trade button, making the deal, and then just sending it, hoping that it works out. You might think it's good enough, right? No, it's not good enough. 99% of the time, it is not going to work out because blind trades, typically without communication or any clear objective on what you're trying to do, aren't necessarily going to go through. I mean, I would say it's one of the worst approaches to getting a trade done. So I have 5, well, more than 5 actually, 8 hints to at least help you complete trades better in fantasy football. The first one, set your intention to trade in good faith. Yes, I am starting this one with a mindset step. Completing a trade in fantasy football, now I might get a lot of blowback for saying this, it shouldn't be about winning the trade, because it's not a competition, ideally, of who tricks who into taking a worse deal, because you get what you give, like the band The New Radicals said. If you go into a trade negotiation trying to screw over the other team out of better talent, there's almost a guarantee that it's not going to happen because the other person's not stupid. The other person will know what you're up to, and you will risk developing a reputation of being unreasonable to even try future trades with, aka burning a bridge. So, set your mind to be patient and be prepared for the possibility of giving up a good player that you prefer to keep in order to get the player you really want. And in the first place, no one wants to trade with someone who's not going to offer something fair in return, what you're looking for. So, if you're going to be the smart ass that replies with a kicker in return for a good player, people aren't going to take you seriously. So, point number 2, reach out to the person who has the players that you want, find out if they're even for sale, which is another good reason not to do blind trades. Maybe the person doesn't want to sell Christian McCaffrey, for example. Whether it's through text message, email, phone call, telegram, carrier pigeon, or just through the private messaging feature of your platform. Ask if they're for sale. You get the response. And you just start with saying, hey, I'm interested in Amon-Ra St. Brown, for example. Is he someone you're willing to sell? Can we figure out a trade? You may be playing in a league where your league mate absolutely will not trade a specific player, like I just said. So you might not even end up getting any trades done with one specific person, because you might be in a league where somebody's going, nope, I never trade, ride or die. And I've been in leagues like that. It's frustrating. So you know your league. Don't waste your time trying to trade with someone who won't entertain any offers. Bullet point number 3, work together with your potential trade partner. Figure out what they want, because this is a part of that negotiation phase. What are they looking for? Do they need a running back? Do they need a tight end? If we're going with the Amon-Ra St. Brown example, hey, how about I offer you Miles Sanders for Amon-Ra St. Brown straight up? Does that help their needs? This is back when Miles Sanders was worth a shit. Of course, that wouldn't happen today. But if it ends up not being satisfactory to your trade partner, okay, maybe they view Amon-Ra St. Brown a little too high than just a startable running back. Maybe they're going to want either your number 1 running back and another position in return. So you go from there. It's up to you on how far you want to go. Because naturally, if that deal is agreed, smash that accept button. You can volunteer to put the trade proposal together in your fantasy platform, or let your trade partner do it. So, simple as, it's not terribly complicated. Just a little communication goes a very long way. And I'll throw out 4 hints that you ought to think about when you work on trades. Number 1, do not get attached to players by name. If you drafted with a cheat sheet based on tiers, you'll have an understanding of what this means. Don't go for a specific player just by name value alone. A lot of people go through this, especially when you get an older player like a Julio Jones, where people get attached to their top 5 days of Julio Jones, but now he's just the emergency number 3-4 wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. Your goal should be to target a player who produces in fantasy on the same tier as the one you'd like to get in a trade, or possibly higher. Do not try the helpful hint number 2. Do not try the used car salesman approach when negotiating a trade. Now, if you've ever bought whether or not you've ever bought a used car on a car lot, and the salesperson's trying way too hard to sell you a specific car, you'll have an idea of what this means. When you negotiate a trade, number 1, try not to over-explain why that offer is good for them, because if you have to say it, it's probably not true. You shouldn't have to get into the specifics, because the other person should at least have an idea of why that player would be good for them. Now, if they ask you, well, that's a different story. You can go from there, but don't be the first to volunteer that information like a used car salesman. Because oftentimes, more often than not, that's just going to make people feel uncomfortable, as if they're going to catch on that you're trying to manipulate them into taking a deal that favors you rather than them. And the worst case scenario is that that'll result them in shutting you out of a trade negotiation altogether, possibly future ones if you're in a dynasty league. So, as we covered in the first step in the guide, you don't want to develop that reputation. Helpful hint number 3. It's okay to shut down offers altogether if your partner is refusing to negotiate in good faith. You might be stuck with a trade partner that's ridiculous. They might want the world for a player like a Miles Sanders as of right now. They might want the world for this unproven commodity. Whoever it is. Might be something ridiculous, even like offering you a kicker in return. It's like, all right, if you're not going to play fair, if you're going to be a smartass, forget it. Let's just move on. It sucks to not have to get that deal done. It's frustrating. I've seen a lot of people in fantasy football communities who absolutely loathe that. But if that's the way the cookie crumbles, so be it. You'll find another trade partner that'll give you a tiered player that you're looking for. Last point, last helpful hint. Don't trade just for the thrill of it. Have a point to your trade. Especially if you're in Dynasty and you're bored in like February. Don't just start crafting trades just because you're bored and you want to see if you can get something done. You might have a player that you really want to get in a trade from someone in week 5, fail to come up with an offer for which both sides agree, and all of a sudden that player gets a season-ending injury in week 6. Now, while we can never predict injuries in football, sometimes these things don't work out in ways in which we don't expect. So that's basically it. I wasn't sure if you guys were going to have any comments in between, which is why I said about 15 minutes, but simple guide, little communication goes a long way.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I know at the end
That was the point I got. Is like good, like just being good, like getting good communication and being willing to like go with the flow of your trading partners and your league, like learning how this is going to work. Like, yeah, like that's good advice. Last thing you want to do is be that guy that's going to piss everyone off.
Yeah. And I just want to point on, at the end you said you can't predict injuries, but also you can use data to figure out, the likelihood of something. If you have a past of being hurt, that's something you could look at. But also just wear and tear you
have to
accumulate
weigh,
through the
just
year.
like
Yeah.
you
But,
got to weigh that, just like you got to weigh when an older player's talent is going to fade. Like,
well,
do you
yes,
expect
but
some
also
of these running
wear
backs
and
to have
tear,
another
like,
good year?
last year we had to do it at the end of our draft with a guy like Austin Eckler, where we knew it was possible. It happened to go into our favor and then end up still not working out somehow. But that was, something that you probably couldn't predict so harshly. But, there
But
is
there are
eventually
situations, but those like are visible. Like at that point, like no,
Well-
you can't predict injuries. But yes, a guy can be injury prone. Like, and that injury prone guy can also play an entire season.
Yeah, but my point more so is like a guy who gets the ball, if you're getting the ball 250 times in a season, then there's a higher risk of you next season to come in and have a chance to get hurt than somebody who touched the ball 70 times.
Yeah, agreed. Not going to disagree with that.
Like Christian McCaffrey, personally, someone I would be wanting to fade after so much usage in the last couple seasons.
See, his usage isn't it hasn't been like the massive 500 carry seasons, 500 touch seasons we saw like Zeke and some other Dallas running backs get like early, and Adrian Peterson, some of that. But like, yeah, I would be more worried about the fact that McCaffrey's about to hit like that age wall that running backs hit, where it's like, is he gonna really like? This is where they start hitting that decline. Most running backs.
How old is he even? I don't even know
believe
how
he's
old
going to be
McCaffrey
28.
is. Gosh, he's so young.
Yes, but the running backs hit a wall.
He's 28 in June.
Yep, running backs hit a wall usually that time, just before they go to hit 30. He might still have one more good year left in him, but like usually this is where it's like a running back has one more good year after 28. And he did just come off a heavy usage season where he was absolutely monstrous for San Francisco.
Yep.
What's wild is that it's reasonably on par with his 2019 season with the Panthers, because the Niners did a much better job managing his workload compared to the Panthers.
Mm-hmm. They did. They really did.
Well, they just have more talent to manage said workload.
That too.
Can I ask? Like I said, I ran as a commissioner in some leagues, so I understand the structure and the responsibility you have. So, like, if I ask you a question, you're uncomfortable, or you don't want to expose someone's philosophy or too much of their, personal details. I get it, but I am curious to ask you some questions because I do think a lot of times, like beginners, for example, will almost be intimidated because they're like, well, these guys have been together for 5 years, so they know each other. If I come into the league, I'm going to disrupt that whole. Like it's that kid in the first grade or the first day of school where it's like I might have a cool new outfit and a fun way to do this, but I'm not going to feel welcomed or like, how do I feel welcomed while still, employing my way, whether it be trade or not. So I do have some interesting questions for you that I think might be uh, might be good for like beginners because it's easy to say like, oh, this is why you should join a league, or like this is the things you should do when you first join a league. What's the one thing that you wish someone would ask you that they never asked you when they first joined your league? Like, what's the one thing you kind of like? Oh, if they ask you this question, or that they attack it in this way, or they take this approach that you're most proud of, that you're like, oh, I got a good one now. Anything like that?
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
basically,
that's a really good question, Logan, and I don't think I have a straightforward answer for that either because I don't think there's been anything that I wish someone had asked me.
Mhm,
But what I will tell you, Logan, based on the like similar to kindergarten or first grade example where you meet all new kids for the first time that you're trying to fit into other cliques
mhm,
or friend groups. Um, as commissioner, I always try and do my best to include everybody. Like if I have somebody in a league that just got married, for example, like I had that in my redraft league, second city redraft, which I didn't pull up here. This person just got married. So like I'll put something in the group chat that says, hey, so and so just got married. Join me in congratulating them. And that's the kind of nice stuff I like to put out there because we don't necessarily know each other in person all the time. So to try and bond the league like that, it's always these little things.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because recently, I don't know if you know this, but like especially now that like DraftKings and FanDuel and some of these bigger platforms are getting into the sports books, especially, but you see it in like our contests too, is people want refunds or they're mad because they played Luka Doncic in a lineup for basketball or they played Julio Jones a couple years ago and he gets hurt in the first quarter and they feel personally obligated to tell DraftKings how disappointed they are that they
Or
got
even the
hurt.
Bijan thing this year, yeah.
Right. Or there's just some kind of injury settlement or expectation of like, hey, if I complain to my DK rep, if I complain to the help agent, I can get a refund. He'll understand. He might not be able to give me a refund one for one, but he'll give me a kickback, right? And so I was recently listening to a podcast where it was actually a DK rep who did that job, who did the customer service kind of uh, feedback with customers, and they were saying one of the worst things you can do is openly complain about something that you know isn't fair, but they have the justification for. So like if someone got hurt in the first 30 seconds, like, yeah, do you want your money back? Is that bad luck? Do you have do you have a case? Sure, but you don't want to purposely piss off the commissioner just for a buck. You don't want to make up a story in a league like, hey, I need my money back because my brother's sick. Like, some of that might be true, but you don't want to be the guy that like invests in a league and then backs out the next week. Like sometimes that's going to happen, life events. Sometimes refunds are necessary for DraftKings, sports books and stuff like that. But you don't purposely want to go out of your way to make the DK help agent's job harder. So has there ever been a time where you just like, oh, this is definitely not what to do? Like it might sound silly, but I think that's very valuable for someone coming into a dynasty league. Tell people the absolute worst way to act. And it might just seem like so stupid that nobody would do it, but I guarantee it will help somebody.
I have not seen anything that egregious, whether I'm the commissioner in a league or I'm just participating in a league.
Mhm.
I what I would say is that I was in a keeper league, which ended up I was in the championship match of that keeper league, and that Bills Bengals match in which DeMar Hamlin almost died last year.
Mhm.
The commissioner of that league was proposing co-champions, and I was in the lead at that point. I was winning, and I didn't like the idea of splitting the pot two ways in the end because I'm like, well, wait a minute. I got lucky and at the same time busted my ass to get here. I don't like the idea of co-champions. I want my first place prize to be declared the champion, even if it's split differently. So what I ended up doing is coming up with a more reasonable pot split. So, for example, before the Bills Bengals matchup happened, the projections on Yahoo, I was at 60% and the other person was at 40%. So I proposed a 60-40 split, which gave the second place person a little more money than they would have earned regularly otherwise. And the reason I proposed that is because I didn't want money to come between us. It's like, you know what? This is my compromise. If they'd make people happier, fine. I just don't want to be co-champions. Just at least declare me the winner.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Like the money wasn't what it was more like I want the title. I want the clout. I want that. Like I won.
Yeah.
Shit happened, but I won. You don't care about the money. You probably would have like been able to be like tell me right now, could they have negotiated you down to a 50-50 split but you're champion?
Probably not
Had he come back?
50-50.
Yeah.
Probably not 50-50, but I would have been willing to do 60-40 if they said it first.
Okay. Good to know.
So
Which is-
that's how seriously I take this. I want to be the winner if I win.
You want it to matter. That makes sense. Like you're willing to be fair, but you want first place to matter. You want there has to be a clear winner in your mind. That makes sense to me.
And that's my philosophy as a commissioner in leagues too. Like when the DeMar Hamlin incident happened, my philosophy is that you have to play the game as it lies, regardless of what happens. There could be a premature termination due to bad weather. There could be another DeMar Hamlin incident. You don't know, act of God. You don't know what's going to happen, and you have to play it as it lies. I don't like the idea of changing the rules just because people aren't happy.
Yeah, but sometimes you got to like I mentioned that podcast with the DF, the DK rep, and he mentioned the reason they offer refunds is like a couple years ago they had a game that got that got postponed, and then like so they were willing to give refunds up to a certain point. You had a certain amount of time basically to contact them and ask for a refund because of the cancellation.
Yeah, and see, in DraftKings' case, though, they're a company and they want to keep their customers. They don't want to lose to the competition of FanDuel. I get that. But, I mean, I'm just running a private fantasy football league here with my own philosophy. People don't like it,
Right.
I mean, I don't want to be the type of asshole that's like, well, if you don't like it, you could leave. Because you got to set some standards. You can't just cave into whatever feels like the flavor of the week.
I was gonna say, I bet you've seen that too, where it's like, you want people to have a say in your league, votes on trades, stuff like that, votes on, structures and changes. But you don't want people having such a bias or a personal bias that like 2 days later they're like, oh, George approved this. I don't like George, so I'm gonna reject the trade because I don't like George. I don't, and so you gotta kind of, it's weird because like we see this in real football too. There's real friendships. Like some owners like other owners more. That's just human nature. So have you ever encountered that where it's like this owner might have had a better trade with someone
All right.
else?
I gotta call it, guys. It's getting late. So
Are you bouncing down? All right.
yeah, have a good one.
Thank you, Donnie. Take care.
So have you ever had that moment where it's like somebody else might have had a better trade from somebody, but they like this owner better, so they took that trade, and then you had to be the middleman to negotiate that?
I have never been in a situation like that, nor have I been in a league that I'm not running that has ever encountered that.
Mm-hmm.
I have been in a potential three-way trade in my old dynasty league where I was shut out of it, and then I didn't get anything out of that deal. And that was my last year in that league when things were starting to go to shit. It just wasn't a league filled with decent enough people, in my opinion, to where I just figured, okay, well, if things are still going to get this salty, fuck it. I'll find a new dynasty league or as I found out later, start my own. And you're looking at it right here. I've had this since 2020, and I'm so happy I started my own league.
Yeah, you should be proud of it. But I was just going to mention, like, my friend runs a pretty serious baseball league, right? And I know they're serious, and I know they pay out, and I know I could be somewhat decent. Baseball is not my favorite sport, but I'm pretty sport adjacent. Like, I love sports, so like I would do a deep dive on it. But I don't like their pay structure. He only pays first place right now.
Yeah,
And so,
see,
like,
I don't agree with that at all.
I don't like that. Like, I don't like a winner take all, but they do. So it's like, I'm not going to go in that league and convince them to change how they want to play. Like, they have majority and they've been doing it long enough, but I'm not going to join a league. Like, to me, that just kills the fun of it. Even though they seem like great guys, even though I probably would have some fun, I do think you have to balance that. Gov, do you have any questions to follow up? I was going to wrap up shortly, but I did have one if you don't have anything.
No, I've gotten my questions out as we've been talking. So
Okay, one more, Evan.
this is
That's
all
okay.
good advice, though. First thing, all good advice.
Yeah, great. Like I say, many people are doing like best ball content, or they're talking about futures of fantasy football from like, well, I still want to talk about fantasy football. I'm just going to go with a popular best ball strategy. And so there's so much of that right now. But I do think this podcast will do good because it's a unique look at a dynasty league on a platform that's not well known but well structured. Like Sleeper is well known for hardcores like me and Gov, I think.
It's starting to increase in popularity, at least.
Yeah, it's structured really well. It just doesn't have the backing yet. It needs that big backing push, that kind of exposure push, I feel like, but it's got a lot of cool features. My last question for you, because I've dealt with this too. You have a good league, it has a good structure, it has good bones. You probably have like 5 owners that you're immensely proud of, and you're like, these people I would ride or die with, right?
Oh, I mean, I like everybody in this league, and that's
Right.
what's key, you know?
At different levels, sure, but I'm saying, like, I'm sure you have like hardcores that you've played for years and years, and you know they're not going anywhere. But as a commissioner, what's the one thing me and Gov could do if we wanted to join a league like yours, but we didn't, like, for some reason you didn't have any openings, and we weren't on your waiting list, but it was taking too long, so we're gonna go to another league. What's the best impression we can leave on a commissioner if we want to join a league for the first time? Like, what's the number one thing we should be willing to do, look for? Any last parting advice like that?
Just try to offer a lot of the same good, positive energy, as cliche as that sounds, that you would want to see in the commissioner as well. It may not necessarily work out if the commissioner just turns out to be sneaky, corrupt, or just an asshole or whatever, but you just want to go in with the right attitude and just go in expecting to have some fun with the league, and just try not to be an asshole when it comes to trades, right? Just like you would do with any other fantasy football league.
Which is kind of what we do with DFS community, Discord channels too, right, Gov? It's like, we know there's going to be toxicity if it reaches a certain level, but you just want to try to limit the toxicity as much as possible. Like, there are going to be things that happen. Someone's going to be upset by a trade. They're going to think it's not fair. Like, those things are going to happen, but you just want to limit the toxicity as much as possible. I really enjoyed this conversation, Evan. If you want to say anything else, these are kind of like long form, interesting. You have a topic, you have a lot of knowledge about it. I was very excited that you tried DFS for the first time. I know you were nervous about it at first because you're like, I'm just a dynasty guy, but I'm like, trust me, it has a lot of correlation. Now I know that it has a lot of differences as well, but I do kind of see how we were able to merge together this podcast and become such good friends. So I'm glad that you were able to honestly give me a personal glimpse of what you find so interesting. To me, I take that very serious as a friend and a co-host of yours. Like, this means something to you. You put a lot of time and effort into it. So thank you for sharing that side of you, with the people.
Absolutely, Logan. Glad I could do this tonight.
All right, now last week I cut Gov off, so let's make sure Gov gets his final statement for the night. You got any people?
Oh, you're good, Logan. Like, thank you. Like, as long as we're ready to go, like, peace out, everyone, and make sure, come watch me on my Twitch stream. I'm going to be going live right after this, doing speed runs of Mario Odyssey. That's why I'm wearing Cappy.
And I love that.
Come give me a follow on Twitch. It costs you nothing but time and effort, and I know that's asking a lot of everyone. I know.
If anybody has any questions, or at least just want to give me a say anything to me, come find me at Barely Fantasy on Twitter. Hit me up, talk shit to me, say whatever you want. I might block you if you're mean, but you know.
Hey, and I remember when this
It's
podcast.
okay. Come say something. Fuck you. It's fine.
Yeah, I'll even take a fuck you.
At least express yourself, because we all have a voice, but you at the end of the day get to choose how you use it. And I remember people would be like, "Well, you're not going to get to 50 subscribers, so this is a cute little thing you're doing. You won't get to 100. Now we're over 100. Now we're getting noticed by bigger." But that's not the point. The point is just that every show we want to get better and better, because then we make someone else better, and then that makes our content more appealing. And then I can say, "Hey, check out my other friend who also does this and DFS. He does gaming and this. Evan does DFS and Dynasty." So we wanted to bring all that to you guys tonight. I'm glad you could join us. Have a good week. We'll see you soon. It won't be that long, but this is the off season. Who knows what next we'll be talking about? IDP does interest me, by the way. So if anyone be willing to try different leagues, different styles, different formats. Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Peace out, everyone.